My name was Kim Sunho. Before all of this happened, I was a perfectly normal person with a perfectly boring life. I worked a desk job. I ate instant ramyun at 2 a.m. I read boys' love novels on my phone under my blanket like a responsible adult. And then I fell off my chair while reading the most dramatic chapter of my favorite web novel and hit my head on the corner of my desk. Embarrassing way to go? Yes. Did I have any regrets? Only that I never finished the chapter. So when I opened my eyes and found myself staring up at an unfamiliar white ceiling with someone shouting near my ear, I thought I was dreaming. But no, I was not dreaming. I was Fujita Kenji, the jealous roommate, the minor villain. The guy who spent half the novel scowling at the protagonist and doing petty things like hiding his shampoo and eating his leftovers. The character every reader hated because he was bitter and small and completely transparent about his feelings for the male lead, except he expressed them in all the wrong ways. In the novel, Fujita Kenji ends up alone. The protagonist falls in love with the charming second male lead. Kenji gets a 2-line farewell scene and is never mentioned again. That was the character I was now living inside of. I sat up slowly in a small dorm room. 2 beds, 2 desks, 1 window with a curtain that was not fully closed. Afternoon light came through the gap and landed on a figure standing near the door, holding a plastic bag of grocery items and looking at me with the most annoyingly beautiful face I had ever seen in my life. Takahashi Ren, the protagonist. Of course. Of course it was him. He was exactly like the novel described him. Tall, dark hair that fell a little over his forehead, warm brown eyes that somehow looked both soft and sharp at the same time. He had one of those faces that made you forget what you were going to say. He was looking at me like I was a problem he was trying to figure out. "You slept for almost 3 hours," he said. His voice was lower than I expected. I thought something was wrong. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I was tired," I said. He tilted his head slightly. "You were making noises." "I was not. You were saying something about a chapter." I wanted to disappear from this earth, from this novel, from the entire concept of existence. "I talk in my sleep," I said. "It means nothing." He looked at me for 1 more second, then put the grocery bag on his desk and started unpacking things without another word. I watched him from across the room, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 10 minutes of my life, which was a generous estimate because I was fairly sure I had only been conscious for 4 of those minutes. Okay, so, I was Fujita Kenji. I was in a boys' love novel. The protagonist was currently putting a carton of milk in the mini-fridge 3 meters away from me. The novel's plot had not started yet, which meant I had time. Time to do what exactly? The novel version of Kenji was going to spend the next 6 months being quietly in love with Ren, doing horrible things because of it, and then watching Ren fall for someone else. The readers called Kenji pathetic. They called him exhausting. One comment I remembered said, and I quote, "Just talk to him, you emotionally constipated gremlin." I was not going to be that gremlin. I was a grown adult who had transmigrated into a fictional character's body with full knowledge of the plot. I had an advantage. I had information. I could change things. Specifically, I was going to distance myself from Ren, avoid all the jealousy-fueled mistakes Kenji was supposed to make, and quietly wait for this novel to resolve itself without me being the villain of anyone's love story. That was the plan. A very good plan. "Hey," Ren said, turning around from the fridge. I looked at him. "Do you want some of this?" He held up a container of leftover rice. "I made too much this morning." And that was when I realized the problem with my very good plan. The novel version of Kenji had eaten Ren's leftovers every single time Ren offered them. It was one of the things the readers found annoying because Kenji never thanked him properly and always pretended he did not care. But Ren kept offering anyway, every time. If I said no, I was already changing something. If I said yes, I was starting exactly where the original Kenji had started. I looked at the container of rice. I looked at Ren's face, which was completely calm and unbothered. The face of a person who had no idea he was the protagonist of a love story that was being observed by a transmigrated soul from another world. "Sure," I said. He nodded and handed it to me with a spoon. I sat on my bed and ate Ren's rice and tried very hard not to think about the fact that this was how everything in the novel had started. It did not work. The rice was, annoyingly, very good. 3 days passed. In those 3 days, I learned several important things about living with Takahashi Ren. First, he was a morning person. He woke up before 7 every single day, and he was not quiet about it. He moved around the room like it was completely acceptable to exist loudly before the sun had fully risen. Drawers opened, water ran. A phone alarm went off and was turned off after exactly 1 beep, because Ren apparently woke up before his own alarm, which was honestly a little suspicious if you asked me. Second, he cooked, not in a casual way, in a, this person actually knows what they are doing way. The dorm kitchen was shared between 6 rooms, and somehow Ren always found a window in the early morning where it was empty, and he would come back with food that smelled better than anything I had eaten in my previous life or this one. He always made extra. He always offered it to me. I said yes every time, which was a problem, but also the rice was genuinely excellent, and I had the self-control of a wet paper bag. Third, and this was the most pressing thing, Ren watched me. Not in a creepy way. Not obviously, but I caught it. He would be reading at his desk, and then when I moved, I would look up, and his eyes were already moving back to his book. He would be on his phone, and then there would be a pause, and I would turn around, and his gaze would shift just a little too quickly. In the novel, the readers never noticed this, because it was written from Kenji's perspective, and Kenji was too busy catastrophizing to pay attention. But I was paying attention, and Ren kept looking at me. I did not know what to do with that information. On the 4th day, I went to class. Kenji's schedule was fine. Nothing too difficult. I sat in lectures and took notes, and tried to feel like a normal university student, and not like a person who had stolen someone else's body and was currently sitting in their narrative like an uninvited guest at a party. The problem was that Ren was in 2 of my classes. Of course he was. This was a boys' love novel. The universe was not going to make it easy. I sat 3 rows behind him in the first class and watched the back of his head, and tried to focus on the professor, who was explaining something about economic theory that I would have found interesting in my previous life, and found completely impossible to absorb right now. Ren had good posture. His notes were neat. He wrote quickly and did not seem to struggle with any of it, which was both admirable and deeply irritating. The second class was worse, because the seating was assigned, and Kenji's assigned seat was directly next to Ren's. I sat down. Ren looked up from his notebook. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I said. We looked at each other for a second. "You have something on your jacket," he said, and reached over and brushed something off my shoulder before I could process what was happening. I sat very still. "Lint," he said, and went back to his notebook. I stared at the front of the classroom and thought about the fact that I was supposed to be distancing myself from this person. It was not going well. After class, I was walking back toward the dorm when someone fell into step beside me. I did not need to look to know who it was. "There's a new ramen place near the station," Ren said. "I heard it's good." "Okay," I said. "Do you want to go?" I looked at him. He was looking ahead, hands in his jacket pockets, completely casual, like he was commenting on the weather and not inviting his roommate, who had done nothing but be mildly awkward around him for 4 days, to go eat ramen. "Why?" I asked. He glanced at me. "Because I want ramen. Go alone. It's more fun with someone else. Ask someone else then." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm asking you," he said simply. I did not have a response to that. It was too direct. The original Kenji, according to the novel, would have said something rude and then immediately felt guilty about it. I was not going to do that. "Fine," I said. We went and got ramen. It was very good ramen. Ren ate his with complete focus and looked up midway through to say that the broth was slightly too salty, and then went back to eating, which was such a specific and unnecessary observation that I almost laughed. I did not laugh. I was keeping a safe emotional distance. I was being responsible. But on the way back, when we were walking side by side and the evening was cool and the streetlights had just come on, Ren said, "You're different." I looked at him. "From what?" He thought about it for a second. From before, he said. You seem different lately. I felt something cold move through me. Of course, he had known Kenji before I arrived. Whatever Kenji had been like in the weeks before the novel's opening chapter, Ren had lived with that version, and now he was noticing that something had changed. People change, I said carefully. Ren looked at me for a long moment. Yeah, he said, they do. He did not sound convinced. Ren started paying more attention to me after the ramen thing. It was not obvious at first, but I had read this novel. I knew how Ren operated. He was the kind of person who noticed things quietly and kept them to himself until he had enough information to form a conclusion. And I was apparently something he was trying to form a conclusion about. He started asking small questions, not big ones, small ones that sounded like casual conversation, but, if you put them all together, formed a very specific picture. What did I think of the new professor in the economics department? Did I prefer coffee or tea? Had I always been this quiet? That last one was the one that got me. Define quiet, I said, without looking up from my book. You don't talk much, he said. He was lying on his bed across the room, staring at the ceiling. You never used to just sit in silence like this. You used to comment on everything. I turned a page. Maybe I got tired of talking, I said. Kenji. Something about the way he said my name made me look up, or rather, his name, Kenji's name, the name I was living under. I needed to stop thinking of it as his name, because right now it was my name, and I was doing a terrible job of feeling like that was true. He was looking at me from across the room. Are you okay? He asked. It was such a simple question. Such a normal human question, and something about it hit me in a way I was not prepared for, because I had been holding a lot of things together for a week, and I was doing it by sheer force of stubbornness, and that question, asked in that quiet and genuine voice, was almost enough to crack it. I'm fine, I said. He held my gaze for another second. Okay, he said, and looked back at the ceiling. I went back to my book, or I pretended to. I was not reading any of it. I was thinking about the fact that Ren had just looked at me with what I could only describe as actual concern, and I did not know what to do with that, because in the novel, Ren was not supposed to focus on Kenji this much at all. In the novel, Ren was friendly but distracted. He had his own things going on. He was kind to Kenji in a casual, offhand way, the way you are kind to someone you live with but have never really seen. He did not investigate. He did not ask if Kenji was okay. So either the novel was different from what I remembered, or I was already changing things without meaning to, and the story was responding. Neither of those possibilities was comforting. The next morning I woke up to find a cup of tea on my desk. I had not asked for tea. I had not mentioned tea. Ren was already gone, clearly off to his early morning kitchen routine, but there was a cup of tea sitting on my desk with a small sticky note next to it that said, in neat handwriting, "You looked cold yesterday." I stared at the sticky note for a very long time. I was in so much trouble. The tea was the exact right temperature. Of course it was. I carried the mug to my first class and thought about the word cold and what it meant, and why Ren had noticed, and why he had done something about it, instead of just noting it and moving on, the way most people would. I thought about it through the entire lecture. I thought about it during lunch, when I sat alone because I had made a firm decision to eat alone and not get attached to anything or anyone. Then Ren appeared with his lunch tray and sat across from me. I thought you were eating with your project group today, I said. They rescheduled, he said, and started eating. I looked at him. He looked at his food. You don't have to sit here, I said. There are other seats. I know, he said. So why are you sitting here? He looked up. He had this very specific expression that I had not been able to name yet. Not quite a smile, not blank either, somewhere in between, like he was thinking about saying something and had decided to say only half of it. Because I want to, he said. That was not an answer. That was a statement. Those were different things, and the fact that he said it like it was obvious and reasonable and required no further explanation was making me feel things I did not have the emotional bandwidth to process right now. You've said that before, he said, because it's still true. He actually smiled then. Small, quick, gone in a second. Fair, he said, and went back to eating. I ate my lunch and tried to remember why I had decided to keep my distance. Something about not becoming the villain, something about the plot, something about not falling into the exact pattern that the original Kenji had fallen into. But the original Kenji had been falling in the wrong direction, away from Ren, into resentment and silence. I was not doing that. I was sitting here, having lunch, being normal. This was fine. Everything was totally fine. His name was Miyamoto Sora. In the novel, Sora was everything the readers loved. Sunshine personality. Easy smile. The kind of person who walked into a room and made it feel warmer without trying. He and Ren had been friends since high school, and the moment their reconnection happened in the novel was described in approximately 4 pages of beautiful prose that made readers cry. I had cried too, the first time I read it, in my previous life, when I was a normal person who was allowed to root for fictional characters without having a personal stake in the outcome. He showed up on a Tuesday. I came back to the dorm room to find Ren at his desk, phone to his ear, laughing at something. Actually laughing, which was different from the small, quick smiles I had seen so far. It was a real laugh, open, easy, the sound of someone who was completely relaxed. I stood in the doorway for a second longer than I should have. "Yeah, come by whenever," Ren was saying into the phone. "Kenji's here too, that's fine." He glanced at me as he said it and gave me a small nod, like, "This is okay, right?" I nodded back and came inside. Sora arrived 20 minutes later and was exactly as described. Warm, cheerful. He shook my hand with both of his and said, "Ren talks about you," which made me freeze for half a second before I recovered and said something politely uninformative in response. The 3 of us sat in the room and talked. Or rather, Sora talked and Ren responded, and I participated at a safe conversational level while internally building a detailed assessment of the situation. Here was the situation. Sora was genuinely very likable. There was nothing wrong with him. He was not a bad person. In the novel, the readers rooted for him and Ren because they made sense together. Easy, natural, no complicated feelings getting in the way. I understood all of that. I also understood, sitting there watching them talk, that I did not like this. Not Sora specifically. Sora was fine. I did not like the way the plot was moving. I did not like the way the narrative gravity of this story was pulling things toward the ending I already knew. I did not like feeling like a person standing outside a window watching something happen inside that they had no right to stop. I was not Kenji, the original character, but I was living in Kenji's life, and Kenji's feelings, the ones that had been in this body before I arrived, were still here. Somewhere underneath everything, not loud, not controlling, but present, the way an old bruise is present when something presses on it. At some point Sora said something funny, and Ren laughed again, and I looked down at my phone and thought, very clearly, I am not going to do the thing Kenji did. I am not going to be bitter about this. I am not going to make Ren's happiness into something that hurts me. But I also thought, I want to be the person who makes him laugh like that. That was the moment I admitted it to myself. I liked Ren. Not in the way the original Kenji liked him, which was tangled up in years of unspoken things and misplaced pride. I liked him the way you like someone when you have been watching them for a few weeks, and they have been quietly kind to you, and they leave tea on your desk, and they sit with you at lunch because they want to, and not because they have to. I liked him, and Sora was here, and the story was going exactly where it was supposed to go. I excused myself and went for a walk. Outside, the evening was cool. I sat on a bench near the main building and looked at the sky, and had a very serious internal conversation with myself about the nature of transmigration and whether or not the universe was playing a very specific joke at my expense. My phone buzzed. A message from Ren. "Where did you go?" Then, 5 seconds later, "It's getting cold." Then, 20 seconds after that, "Sora brought way too many snacks. Come back." I stared at my phone. 3 messages, in a row. Because I had been gone for 15 minutes, I walked back to the dorm. When I came in, Sora was sitting on the floor with an enormous bag of chips, and Ren was at his desk. And the moment I opened the door, Ren looked up with something in his face that I could not quite name before it smoothed out into his usual expression. "You're back," he said. "Obviously," I said. Sora held up a chip and said, Finally. Sit down. We're arguing about whether octopus-flavored snacks are good, and I need a second opinion. I sat down. The thing I had admitted to myself sat with me all evening, quiet and inconvenient, like a stone in a shoe. 2 weeks later, something happened that was definitely not in the novel. Ren got sick. In the story I had read, Ren did not get sick. He was consistently healthy and functional throughout the entire plot, which was lucky for the narrative because the plot required him to be in multiple places doing multiple things. He did not get fevers. He did not miss class. He was one of those people the universe apparently protected from illness out of narrative convenience. Except now he was sick. It started on a Thursday night. I noticed he was quieter than usual at dinner, and that his food was barely touched, which was unusual, because Ren always ate everything on his plate, and then commented on whatever it was he had eaten, whether it was good or not, or somewhere in between. "Are you feeling all right?" I asked. "Fine," he said. By Friday morning, he had a fever of 38.4 and was refusing to admit it. I found out because he came back from his morning kitchen trip looking pale and slightly unsteady, and when I told him he looked terrible, he said, "I'm fine," and sat down on his bed and immediately put his head in his hands. "You're not fine," I said. "I'm a little tired. You have a fever. You don't know that." I got up, went to Kenji's desk drawer where, apparently, Kenji kept a thermometer because he was a prepared person even if he was fictional, and handed it to Ren. He looked at it. He looked at me. "You're not going to leave until I use it, are you?" he said. "No," I said. He used it, 38.6. He looked at the number and had the expression of someone who had been betrayed by their own body. "You need to stay in bed," I said. "I have class," he said. "I'll get your notes." He looked at me with something I could not read. "You don't have to do that." "I know," I said. There was a pause. "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" he asked, not suspicious, genuinely curious. I thought about that question for a second. "Because you leave tea on my desk," I said, "and someone should return the favor." Something shifted in his expression, small, quiet. "Okay," he said. He stayed in bed. I went to his classes and took his notes. I came back and found him asleep, and I left the notes on his desk and went to the kitchen and made the simplest version of rice porridge I knew how to make, which was the kind my own mother had made when I was sick in my previous life, which felt like a different century now. I brought it back. He was awake, sitting up and looking much less pale, and when he saw the bowl he was quiet for a second. "You cooked," he said. "Don't read too much into it," I said. "I'm not," he said, but he was almost smiling. He ate the whole bowl and said it was good, and the way he said it was so simple and genuine that I had to turn around and pretend to be doing something at my desk so he would not see my face. This was going in a direction I had not planned for. I had planned for distance. I had planned for careful managed helpfulness from a safe emotional radius. I had not planned for sitting across from Ren while he ate my cooking and felt something warm settle in the center of my chest. Later that night, when the lights were off and the room was quiet, Ren said from his bed, "Kenji." "Yeah," I said. "Thank you." I stared at the ceiling. "Don't mention it," I said. Another pause. "I feel like I'm figuring you out wrong," he said. His voice was quieter now, the edges soft. "Like there's something I keep almost understanding and then it moves." I did not breathe for a second. "That sounds exhausting," I said. "It kind of is," he said, and then, "I don't mind though." I had no response to that. I lay in the dark and listened to Ren's breathing slow into sleep and thought about the novel I had read, the ending I knew, and the fact that this version of the story felt less and less like the one I remembered. The plot twist arrived in the form of Miyamoto Sora sitting across from me in the campus cafe and saying, without preamble, "You like Ren." I put my cup down. "Excuse me," I said. "I've been watching you two," Sora said, completely comfortable, like he was commenting on the weather. "It's pretty obvious." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "Kenji, I'm serious. You watched him for the entire duration of last Tuesday's movie night, and the movie was actually very good." I had no response to that, because it was accurate, and I was furious. Sora wrapped both hands around his coffee cup and looked at me with the expression of someone who was finding all of this charming in a way that was extremely irritating. "I'm not here to cause problems," he said. "I want you to know that." I looked at him carefully. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, "that I know you probably thought you had to worry about me, and I'm telling you that you don't." Something moved through me, cold and strange. "The novel," I said, and then stopped, because that sentence did not make sense to a person who did not know they were inside one. But Sora tilted his head, and something in his eyes shifted. "What novel?" he asked, very carefully. I stared at him. He stared at me. "You know," I said. He blinked. Then he exhaled slowly, like someone who had been holding something in for a long time. "Okay," he said. "Okay. Yes, I know." The world did a small tilt. "You transmigrated too?" I said. "6 weeks before you," he said. "I arrived at the beginning of the pre-story arc. I've been trying to figure out how to fix things ever since." I sat back in my chair. I looked at him. He looked back at me. "In the original story," I said slowly, "you and Ren end up strangers," he said. "He and I get together. I always felt terrible about it, even reading it. Kenji's storyline is the saddest one in the whole novel." "I know," I said. "I read it." "So did I." He wrapped his hands tighter around the cup. "But here's the thing. I've been watching Ren for 6 weeks, and he's not doing what he does in the novel. He's not looking at me the way the story says he should. He looks at you." Something tightened in my chest. "He looks at everyone," I said. "No," Sora said. "I've seen how he looks at everyone. This is different. This is specific. It's a you thing." I wanted to dismiss it. I had very good reasons for dismissing it. The plot, the ending, the narrative weight of a story that was supposed to go a certain way. But Sora was here, and he had transmigrated, and he was looking at me like the most obvious thing in the world was sitting right in front of both of us, and I was just refusing to acknowledge it. "What are you saying?" I said. "I'm saying," Sora said, "that the story changed. And I think you changed it. And I think you should stop treating Ren like someone you need to keep a safe distance from, and just talk to him." I looked at the table. "It's not that simple," I said. "It never is," he said, "but you keep making it harder than it needs to be." He stood up, picked up his coffee. "Hey." "He asked me about you last week. Do you know what he said?" I looked up. Sora smiled. "He said, 'I feel like the real him shows up sometimes, and then he hides it. I want to know which one is real.'" He left. I sat in the cafe alone and thought about that sentence for a very long time. The real him. I had been so careful, so controlled, so busy trying not to be the jealous villain that I had never once let Ren see that there was actually a person underneath all of that carefulness. A real one, with feelings and opinions and a whole previous life that had led, inexplicably, here. I pulled out my phone. I had a message from Ren, from 20 minutes ago. It said, "Dinner tonight? I found a new place. It has the kind of ramen you like." He remembered what kind of ramen I liked. I typed back, "Yes. What time?" We went to dinner. It was a small place, close and warm inside, with low lighting and the sound of broth bubbling somewhere in the kitchen. We sat across from each other and ordered and talked about small things for a while. The kind of conversation that is comfortable and easy because you have been having smaller versions of it for weeks. But there was something different about the air tonight, something I could feel but not quite name. Ren poured tea for both of us and then looked up and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said. He was quiet for a second, like he was choosing words carefully. "What were you like before?" he asked. "Before the start of this year. I've known you for a while, but lately it feels like I'm meeting someone new." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I said. "I mean," he said, "that I've known Kenji Fujita for 2 years. We've lived in the same room since last spring, and you're different now. Not worse, not better necessarily, just..." He paused. "Different. You look at things differently. You're kinder than you used to be. You do things without making it seem like you're waiting for credit." He met my eyes. "What changed?" I held his gaze. This was the moment. I knew it the way you know a cliff edge before you reach it. Not because you can see it yet, but because something in the air changes. I could say nothing changed. I was good at deflection. I had been practicing it for weeks. Or I could tell him something true. Something happened to me, I said, that I can't explain properly. And after it happened, I saw some things clearly that I had been confused about before, about myself, about what I actually wanted. He was listening, fully, the way Ren always listened, with his whole attention. Like what? He asked. Like, I said, and then stopped and started again. I spent a lot of time being afraid of how I felt about things, pretending I didn't care when I did, treating the wrong things like problems instead of just, I looked at the table, letting them be what they were. Ren was quiet. That sounds like it was exhausting, he said. It was, I said. It is. I'm still working on it. Another pause. Longer this time. Kenji, he said. Yeah. Is this you telling me something? I looked up. He was watching me with that specific expression, the one I had never been able to name, and this time, sitting close in a warm, small restaurant with tea in front of us, and the sound of the kitchen behind us, I thought I understood what it was. It was the expression of someone who already knew the answer, and was waiting to see if you would say it. Maybe, I said. That's not a no, he said. It's not a yes either. It's something, though. It's something, I agreed. He was almost smiling. That small, quick, almost smile that appeared and disappeared in a second. Except this time it stayed a moment longer. I've been trying to figure you out, he said, for weeks. Every time I thought I had it, you'd do something that didn't fit what I expected. Something more. He tilted his head. More honest. More real. And? I said. And I think I like this version of you, he said simply. The warmth that moved through me was embarrassing in its intensity. That's a lot to say over ramen, I managed. The ramen is very good here, he said. It seemed appropriate. I looked at him. He looked at me. I like you too, I said. It came out quieter than I intended. More real. Less defended. I don't know what to do with it. But I like you. Ren looked at me for a long moment. You don't have to do anything with it right now, he said. That easy? I said. Not easy, he said. Just not complicated either. We can just... He gestured slightly, a small open movement with one hand. Keep going, see what it is. I thought about the novel, the ending it had been written toward, the narrative that had been pulling everything in a specific direction, until something shifted and it became this instead. Two transmigrated people in the story, changing things without meaning to. A protagonist who was not following his script. A jealous roommate who decided, somewhere along the way, not to be jealous at all. Okay, I said. We can do that. He reached across the table and very casually picked up one of my unused chopsticks, because his had an imperfection he did not like, and replaced it with one of his own, and the whole thing was done so naturally that I almost missed the fact that he had touched my hand for a second in the process. Almost. Your ramen is getting cold, he said. I know, I said. I ate my ramen. He ate his. And when we walked back to the dorm, the distance between us was slightly less than it had been before, and neither of us mentioned it, and neither of us moved away from it either. 1 month later, I was at my desk, reading, when Ren came back from evening practice. He dropped his bag by the door, grabbed a towel, and on his way to the showers he stopped by my desk and said, "There's something on your shoulder again." "There's never anything on my shoulder," I said, without looking up. "You're right," he said. I looked up. He was already walking away, smiling slightly, which was absolutely unfair. We had not put a name to things. Not officially. Not with a formal conversation where someone said the words and someone else said yes or no. It had grown on its own, the way things do when you stop trying to control them, through small moments that accumulated like rain, until one day you looked down and something was growing. He saved me the window seat when we had class together. I made extra food on mornings when he had early practice. He asked my opinion on things and then actually thought about what I said. I stopped hiding when I was tired or frustrated, and learned that he was the kind of person who noticed without making a production of it. Sora had given us a very satisfied smile the last time we were all together, and then said absolutely nothing about it, which was a form of kindness I respected deeply. The night I actually said it was a quiet one. We were both at our desks, studying, and the room was the kind of comfortable and silent that you only have with someone you have fully relaxed around. Not the silence of two people ignoring each other, the other kind. I looked at him. He was reading. His hair was doing the thing where a piece of it fell slightly forward and he had not noticed. There was a small ink mark on his wrist from earlier. He was completely present, completely himself, not performing anything for anyone. "Ren," I said. He looked up. "I want to be clear about something," I said. He closed his book slightly. "Okay?" "I like you," I said. "Not as a thing I'm uncertain about or working through. I just do." I wanted to say it clearly. He was quiet for a second. "I know," he said. "I'm aware you know," I said. "I'm saying it anyway." Something opened up in his expression. Not the small, almost smile. Something bigger. Something I had not seen before. And it was the kind of thing that made you feel like you had been looking at a door for a long time and it had finally opened. "I like you too," he said, clearly, without uncertainty. "Good," I said. "Good," he said. We looked at each other. "This is where people usually do something," I said. He stood up. He crossed the small space between our desks. He sat on the edge of mine in a way that was mildly inconvenient for my book, and completely convenient for being close, and he said, "I'm going to be very annoying about this. You should know." "Annoying how?" I said. "The checking on you kind. The remembering your preferences kind. The showing up kind." "That sounds terrible," I said. "It really will be," he agreed. And then he was closer, and his forehead was almost against mine, and he said, very quietly, "Is this okay?" I thought about the novel I had transmigrated into, the ending it was supposed to have, the jealous roommate who was supposed to end up alone and unmemorable, a cautionary footnote in someone else's love story. I thought about Sora, who had arrived 6 weeks before me, and had spent those weeks quietly making sure this story had room to become something else. I thought about Ren, who had noticed from the very beginning that something had changed, and who had stayed curious about it instead of walking away. And I thought about myself, the person I had been in my previous life, reading love stories alone at 2 a.m. and wondering what it would feel like to be inside one. "Yes," I said. He smiled. The real version. Full and unguarded. The one I had been watching from a safe distance for weeks and had finally stopped moving away from. "Good," he said. Outside the window, the evening was exactly as ordinary as evenings are when nothing dramatic is happening and something true is. The campus was quiet. Lights were on in other windows. Somewhere a door closed and footsteps crossed the hall, and someone laughed in another room. Inside our room it was warm. I had come into this story as the villain, the jealous one. The character nobody was rooting for, and somewhere along the way, without meaning to, I had become someone Ren looked at like I was the answer to a question he had been asking for a long time. I was still figuring out what to do with that. I thought I had time to figure it out now. "You're thinking loudly again," Ren said. "I'm always thinking," I said. "What about?" I looked at him. "This," I said. "Just this." He did not ask me to explain it. He understood it the way he understood most things about me, quietly and without requiring more than I was ready to give. We stayed like that for a while, close and unhurried and real. And for the first time since I had opened my eyes in this story, I did not want to be anywhere else.